Hey, it's Carly with LaunchCode. So we're in our second video on implementing model validation in our coding events application. Like I mentioned last video, model validation sort of requires changes to be made to the view model and the controller and the view itself in order to kind of get the full validation experience. Before we get started on what changes we're going to be making to the controller for its portion of the validation feature, I just have a couple of, corrections or modifications to the ending state of our application from the last video. So the last video, just refresh our memory. So in the last video, we added just a couple of samples of how we can add these validation attributes onto our view model. Actually, one thing that I did in the last video is at a number of times I referred to these as model validation annotations, which isn't necessarily incorrect, but really the term for these items that sit on top of properties inside of square brackets within this environment at least are typically referred to as attributes. So I apologize for that. So that's more of a correction, but a couple of modifications. So the last time, we added these validation attributes, and we opened the running application, and not much changed except for the view of a contact email box. And when we opened that up, let's open that again. We had, the display name or the label for that item was contact email, which fully reflected the property on the view model, and I had mentioned that that's not great, that we don't exactly want that name. Well, easy enough to change that. We can just override what the ASP.NET framework gives us with that ASP4 tag helper. We can just write our own label. So we'll now have contact email with a space in the name. So I'll save that so we don't forget. Now, another item that I did forget as well in sort of doing the cleanup of, we added this new contact email property, what other portions of the application need to know about it. One thing that I had left off that you'll find in the end branch of that video is to add a view of that event detail within the home table that lists all of our events. So to add that, it's just as easy as copying any other, oops, we missed a little caret. It's just as easy as copying any other table information, table column, and adding that event property. Okay, so there we go. So sorry about that. Just when the starting branch for this video starts with this state. So we have a contact email column appearing in the home page, and we also have that contact email on the add form labeled with a space. So that should wrap up sort of some discrepancies with where we ended at the last video. So now that we have that wrapped up, back to the original purpose of this video. So the original purpose is to take action to implement model validation within our controller classes. So we have these attributes, and we've seen that those attributes don't really do much. They don't do anything really on the form as is without additional changes in our application. So that the next change that we need to make is within the controller class. So on the action method that handles processing that event form, that's where we want to check and see, hey, we've made these, we've made a couple of checks, we've made a couple of rules about what kind of information gets submitted in that add event form. Now within this add post action method, we want to actually check for that and do something different other than creating a new event object if there's some issue with the data that's been submitted. And the way that we do that is with a property that's a part of the controller class, the main controller class that all of our controllers inherit from, called model state. So we're going to say if model state dot is valid, then do something. And that something is create events and redirect the user to the home page where we list events. If that's not met, then we want to do something else. We want to just stay on that same page, right? So we'll say return, nope, not that one, return view. And in line with using our view model, we're going to pass in that view model. So, like I said, model state is a property that exists within the controller class, so that's what we're taking advantage of here. And then this check is just a conditional that will, or a Boolean to check and see if those validation attributes have been, if the requirements or the rules that the validation attributes have set for that form, if those have been met. If they've been met, then we do indeed create that new event model using those form properties and add it to our list of events. But if they haven't been met, if those rules haven't been met, then we're going to just return that same form view. Adding in this view model object now means that when our form is, as Chris would say, when our form is short-circuited, when we come back to that same view of the add event form, we have access to those error messages that we've put inside of the validation attributes in the view model. So I don't know why my application's running now, but let's stop it and start it again. So we should be able to see that redirect action. Well, let's try it actually with no information. So see, nothing was submitted. We weren't taken to the home page. We just stayed on the same page. Now we aren't seeing the actual error messages because that's the last component of this validation work, which is to actually change the view of this add event form to be able to display that information that's coming from the validation attributes. So we'll do that next time.